As a backdrop, I want to read you something that Jesus said about his cousin, John the Baptist. As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind. And so we've all seen a pond or a river, a lake, and there's a reed or cattails there, and they're kind of swaying in the breeze, back and forth, moving. And Jesus is saying about John, he's not like that. John was a religious leader that knew what he believed. He had strong convictions. He knew what he expected of other people, and there was no compromise in that whatsoever. And I want to use that as a backdrop to talk about history here in Utah, history of the Mormon Church, that does sway like a reed because of strategic compromise. Now, it didn't start that way. When Joseph Smith started the Mormon Church in 1830, it was like most extreme religious movements. There was no compromise in it. There was a new set of beliefs, new ideas about God, and they were very rigid in how they practiced those, and it made them stand out amongst their communities, even to the degree that they bounced from New York to Ohio to Missouri to Illinois, because they rubbed the community wrong because they wouldn't compromise in their beliefs and their lifestyles and their practices. But in 1847, when Brigham Young, now leading the Mormon Church, arrives in Utah, that all changes. Not initially. Over that first year or so, 100 people, and as the community grew here, the idea was get as far away as you could from other people, almost like a religious utopia on the edge of the world, or at least the edge of the United States. We can do what we want, we can believe what we want, there's going to be no compromise, no pressure from people. And then in 1848, gold is discovered in California, and by 1849, the 49ers, there's 100,000 people moving from the east to the west, coming right through Utah. The Oregon Trail, the California Trail is the ones that most people use, and there was a cutoff that came down into the Salt Lake Valley. And the idea was to come here and replenish supplies and buy things and rest up and get yourself ready for the rest of the trip of California. And it was at that point that Brigham Young, who was leading the church, and the Mormon leaders and Mormon people had to make a decision. Do we shun them? Do we push them back? Do we not embrace people as they come into our community? Or do we take advantage of the economic opportunity? And that's what they shifted to. The compromise was we no longer get to be by ourselves, but there's a lot of people coming through our area, and we have the perfect location to service them and have businesses here. 1861, the telegraph arrives in Utah, and so now there's communications with the rest of the United States, and more ideas are coming through Utah. 1869 was a huge one. The railroad arrives in Utah. So now there's a lot of people who have easy access into this area here. Initially, Brigham Young Mormon church leaders were a bit resistant because 90% of the population at that point was Mormon. And now all of a sudden, lots of people are moving here. Businesses are springing up. And eventually the shift was, let's take advantage of the economic opportunity to be with all these different types of people and start all kinds of different businesses. And so soon it was 50% of the state, the Utah area, the Salt Lake Valley, now is Mormon, 50% non-Mormon. 1869, that happens. 1890, probably one of the biggest things in their history. At that point, Nevada, Idaho, Oregon, Wyoming, Colorado, California, those are all states, but Utah isn't. It's still a federal territory. And the sticking issue is the doctrine of polygamy. So at that point, the United States said there'll be no statehood granted as long as the people of Utah practice that particular religious idea. And there was a decision point for them, are we going to compromise or not? Are we going to shift and move to a different doctrine? Because if it's federally held, if it's a territory, all the power is held by the United States and it's a federal thing. If they shift to a state, it's locally held power, and that's what they did. So you see, over these first 30, 40 years, it's this huge sort of a religious compromise, strategic compromise that begins to then become systemic and move out into the greater communities and the families and the way people began to relate to one another. Compromise means I believe something, or I was going one direction, and then I reverse field and go another one. When I was doing some of the research for a doctoral project, one of the amazing things I saw how this showed up in families, the project was what happens in a family when someone leaves the Mormon religion and joins another religion. And the research showed that initially there was a lot of conflict in the families and in the personal interviews, lots of schisms, harsh words, very difficult for the families to navigate someone leaving the Mormon religion, going to another religion. But here was the amazing thing, is probably the upside to this idea of compromise. In 100% of the families, this is the research that I did, 100% of the families, they found some way to compromise so the family could be reunited. And that's different. Just think of some of the religions that you know about, that when someone leaves that religion, there's no path back unless they change and come back to the religion. Not the case because of the ability to make compromises. Now, why does it matter? Well, it's hard to hit a moving target. When something is swaying in the wind and you think you have an angle on it, you're going to speak to a certain idea or a certain doctrine of the Mormon Church, and then it changes, it makes it difficult. So I have some ideas for you. Here's a big idea. Focus on unchanging matters of the heart. When you're doing ministry in Utah, now being here 10 years, not to get caught up in the latest doctrines of the church or what the church believes, but instead focus on the universal, unchanging matters of the heart. Matters of the heart don't change by culture or church or society. They're timeless to history. Guilt always needs forgiveness. Shame always needs acceptance. Fear always needs security. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to love someone. And those don't change. So as you develop bridges and ways to be with people in Utah, regardless of how the Mormon Church changes or people's willingness to compromise, those don't change. The second thing is focus on the story of Jesus and talk to people about what it means to be close to God, which is a matter of the heart. Eternity in the heart, everybody wants to be close to God, but how does it occur? I was astounded that so many people that have been in church all their lives here and been around church all their lives don't really know the story of Jesus at all. And they don't really have an idea that they can be close to God and that God wants to be close to them. And so to focus on that, this is the story of Jesus, which doesn't change. And this is what it means to want to be close to God, which doesn't change. And here's how it happens. And then the third one is God's grace. And I put that in there because there is one thing that hasn't changed. It's a constant thread through the Mormon church and religion from the very beginning. And it's this: you have to earn your way to God. You have to earn your way with God. In the Mormon church, when you make a mistake, you have to earn your way back. They have a clear set of standards that you have to hit to be worthy to participate in different things that they do in the temple or different type of religious activities. In fact, you even earn an ID card that says you're worthy because you've done what you're supposed to do. You've earned the right to participate. Now, grace is entirely different than that. Grace is something that we receive. It's a gift. God initiates grace. It doesn't have anything to do with my ability to earn it or not earn it. And the earning mentality in the Mormon church provides this really wonderful backdrop to talk to people about grace, the burden that people carry here, because they're always trying to earn their way. And when you talk about grace, it is so contrasted and different. So the history sort of sets it up. Here's the bottom line. Our main opportunity lies in matters of the heart. So don't get too caught up. If you're planning to come to Utah, you're in Utah now, don't get put off or angry or offended because things change in the Mormon church. They always have, probably always will. But matters of the heart, that's where our opportunity lies.